Do you ever wake up and feel as if the world around you is asleep, moving in a rhythm that you can no longer recognize? I remember the moment when I first felt this, a kind of quiet horror mixed with awe, as if a veil had been lifted, and yet everyone else was wandering blissfully through the shadows. I walked through streets crowded with faces, each locked in habitual routines, each oblivious to the deep currents beneath the surface of life. And I knew in that moment that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. I had spent years chasing knowledge, reading books, listening to voices older than myself, hoping to understand something ineffable that lingered always just beyond my grasp. And then one morning, perhaps in the silent hush before dawn, I noticed it. A subtle resonance, a vibrational hum beneath the chatter of the world. It whispered truths that defied language, that refused to be pinned down by the neat categories of ordinary life. I realized that the world I thought I knew was merely a projection, a mask covering the richness of reality that few would ever glimpse. Walking among people, I noticed their gestures, their words, and the almost automatic motions of their lives. Each smile, each handshake, each routine exchange was both familiar and alien to me. It was as if I had been granted access to the backstage of existence, watching a play whose actors had no idea they were performing. Yet, there was a kind of beauty in their ignorance, a kind of innocence that reminded me why the veil exists at all. Without it, the weight of seeing too much too soon could crush the unprepared mind. I began to observe the subtle dissonances, the matrix moments, as I called them in my head, the way someone's eyes would flicker with a confusion I recognized as the echo of something they felt but could not articulate. The half-heard thoughts, the unexamined impulses, the habitual retreat into the comfort of routine. And I realized that my awakening was not a singular event, but a continuous unfolding, each moment presenting a new layer of understanding, a new challenge of integrating this deeper awareness into the life I had always known. It was not easy. There were times when the clarity of my perception made even the simplest social interaction feel alienating. I would speak, and the words would feel hollow or misunderstood. I would attempt to explain, to share a glimpse of the reality I had begun to inhabit, and I would be met with blank stares or polite nods. And in those moments, I learned the subtle, painful art of holding my peace. I could not force others to see, nor could I pretend to be blind to what I now observed. My task was to remain grounded, to cultivate an inner sanctuary where the noise of the world could not unsettle the calm I was learning to embody. In that sanctuary, I discovered practices that became lifelines. I learned to anchor myself in breath, to let the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation tether me to the present while my mind roamed the vast landscapes of consciousness. I meditated on the flickering patterns of light and shadow, on the ebb and flow of thought and feeling, allowing each observation to deepen my understanding rather than distract me. I created spaces, both physical and mental, where my spirit could stretch and play, where the awakening I was experiencing could flourish without interference from the chaos outside. I also learned to navigate relationships differently. I began to notice the subtle currents that underlie human connection, the invisible threads that link us even when we are blind to them. I practiced listening in a way that transcended words, responding with presence rather than argument, embodying truths that could not be imposed but only reflected. In doing so, I discovered a new form of communication, one that honors both the awakened self and the sleeping world, allowing me to exist fully in both realms without conflict. Sometimes, walking alone at night, I would feel a strange euphoria and an equally strange melancholy. The world was beautiful, yes, but its beauty was layered with fragility, with a delicate web of illusions that, once pierced, revealed the raw, unvarnished texture of existence. I realized that my journey was not about escaping this world, but about navigating it with eyes wide open. To live fully awake is to feel deeply, to see both the shadows and the light, to recognize the patterns that others miss, and to act with a deliberate grace that honors the intelligence of life itself. I recall a particular morning standing on a hill as the sun broke over the horizon. The colors bled in ways that defied description, the air vibrating with an almost audible song. In that moment, I felt a profound recognition. Everything, every living being, every movement of wind and water was part of a vast, intricate dance, and yet few ever noticed. They passed through it like sleepwalkers, unaware of the majesty that hums beneath their feet. I felt both gratitude and urgency. Gratitude for the clarity I had been granted, urgency to carry it forward, to translate it into a way of being that could touch others, even if only subtly. It is in the ordinary moments I have found that the awakening is tested most. A conversation over coffee, the commute to work, the mundane tasks that consume our days. These are not distractions, but the proving ground. Here, the deeper understanding either integrates into life or becomes a weight, an unfulfilled longing. I have learned to see the sacred in the mundane, to approach even trivial acts with mindfulness, recognizing that the essence of awakening is not escape, but presence. To be fully present is to honor both the world as it appears and the world as it is. And yet, I am not immune to doubt. There are days when the noise of the sleeping world penetrates my inner sanctum, when the loneliness of perceiving differently feels unbearable. I have learned to embrace these moments as teachers rather than enemies, to let them remind me that awakening is not a destination but an ongoing process. I listen to the whispers of my own heart, the subtle nudges that guide me toward integrity, curiosity, and wonder, and in doing so, I remain connected to both the vast unknown and the tangible reality that surrounds me. This journey has taught me the delicate art of balancing observation with action, to witness the deeper currents of life without getting swept away, to participate fully in the human experience while maintaining a sense of sacred awareness. This is the dance of awakening. It is a path that requires courage, patience, and the willingness to confront one's own illusions, even as we glimpse the illusions of the world around us. I often wonder what it would take for others to awaken in the same way. Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. I do not know. All I can do is walk my path, speak when the moment calls for it, remain silent when it does not, and cultivate the inner clarity that allows the deeper truths to shine through naturally. I have come to understand that awakening is not a gift bestowed by external forces, but a personal commitment, a choice to perceive, to feel, to engage with the world in a way that honors both its beauty and its mystery. And so I continue, walking, observing, listening, breathing. Each moment is an opportunity, each encounter a lesson, each sensation a reminder that life is far more intricate than the sleeping world would ever suggest. I do not know what lies ahead, nor do I seek to control it. I simply commit to being awake, to embodying the awareness that has been given to me, and to discovering with each passing day what it truly means to live as a being fully conscious of the deeper realities that weave the fabric of existence, to control it. I simply commit to moving forward with awareness, to let each moment of clarity guide my steps through the labyrinth of ordinary life. The streets, the conversations, the fleeting glances, each carries a lesson, each is a mirror reflecting something I am still learning to recognize within myself. I have become attuned to the subtle vibrations that ripple beneath the surface of social exchanges, noticing when energy shifts, when intention flickers, when a moment of truth pierces the veil. I have watched myself navigate the tension between being fully awake and maintaining the appearance of normalcy. It is a delicate balance, a tightrope stretched across two worlds, one conscious and luminous, the other habitual and dimly aware. There are moments when the hum of ordinary existence feels unbearable, when every interaction threatens to dilute the clarity I have cultivated. And yet, I have discovered that to live fully in the awakened state requires more than solitude. It demands engagement with life itself, an active participation in the dance of consciousness, even when the rhythms of others seem discordant. There is a power in observation, in the act of seeing without judgment. I have learned to witness my own thoughts and emotions as they arise, to follow their trajectory without clinging or resistance. The mind is a restless companion, constantly weaving narratives, conjuring fears and desires. Yet I have found that when I step back, when I inhabit the role of observer, the illusions lose their grip. They reveal themselves not as threats, but as opportunities to deepen my understanding of the subtle interplay between perception and reality. Moments of solitude, I have explored the landscapes of my imagination with a vividness that both terrifies and enthralls. I walk through forests of thought, rivers of feeling, skies that stretch into dimensions unseen. Inner worlds, I confront the patterns of conditioning, the echoes of ancestral voices, the unspoken fears that anchor consciousness to the mundane. And in confronting them, I find a kind of liberation, a recognition that the boundaries of my experience are as fluid as the currents that shape them. I have observed how the energy of the world interacts with my own. The noise, the chatter, the constant movement, it can overwhelm or it can illuminate. By cultivating a field of awareness, by holding space for my own presence amidst the turbulence, I have discovered a quiet power. It is the power to remain undisturbed, to radiate calm even when chaos surges, to act from a place of insight rather than reaction. Learn that true influence is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it reshapes interactions with a force that no overt action could achieve. The awakening has altered the way I perceive time. Moments stretch and contract, each carrying layers of significance that the unawakened cannot sense. I have walked through cities where hours seem suspended, watching shadows bend and colors shift, aware that beneath the ordinary flow, a deeper rhythm persists. I feel it in the pulse of the wind, in the cadence of footsteps, in the hush of a conversation that reveals more than words can express. Time becomes not a linear measure, but a living, breathing presence, inviting me to inhabit each instant fully. I have also come to understand the subtle art of selective engagement. To speak is to risk diluting perception, to impose a map upon a terrain not yet fully explored by others. Yet silence, when wielded with intention, becomes a teacher, a demonstration of awareness without coercion. I practice the balance between revealing and embodying, recognizing that my presence alone can catalyze insight far more effectively than any argument or exposition. It is in being, not preaching, that transformation quietly occurs. In this way, I have learned to navigate relationships with a radical patience. The awakening does not demand isolation, but invites discernment. I cultivate connections that honor both my inner expansion and the natural limitations of those around me. I have discovered that love, when grounded in consciousness rather than expectation, becomes a sustaining force, capable of bridging gaps that words cannot. I offer support. I share understanding, yet I remain anchored in my own awareness, neither overwhelmed nor diminished by the currents of others. There are days when the beauty of existence becomes almost unbearable in its intensity. I stand in natural spaces, feeling the pulse of life in every leaf, every stone, every drop of rain. The universe reveals itself as a living, breathing entity, intricate, complex, and infinitely intelligent. I sense the hidden patterns, the subtle connections that thread together the seen and the unseen, and I recognize the fragility of this consciousness within the vast web of reality. Gratitude surges within me, tempered by a profound humility, for the clarity that allows me to perceive what so many overlook. I have also learned that integration is not passive. The awareness I carry must touch the world, however lightly. I approach tasks with an expanded perception, whether writing, speaking, or simply interacting with others. The mundane is transformed. When approached through the lens of consciousness, a cup of tea becomes a ritual, a conversation becomes a portal, a simple gesture carries the weight of attention. This is the alchemy of living awake, the process by which the ordinary is transfigured into the extraordinary through presence. The inner landscapes I traverse are mirrored by the outer world. I notice patterns in human behavior, cultural rhythms and social conventions that reveal the unexamined assumptions of collective life. I move through them with a dual awareness, participating while observing, engaging while witnessing. The challenge is constant, for the unconscious pulls relentlessly toward conformity, toward distraction, toward the comfort of habitual thought. And yet I have come to appreciate the paradox. The very obstacles that test me are the crucibles in which understanding deepens. I have walked streets at night, the city lights flickering like distant constellations, feeling the pulse of life and the vibration of energy all around me. I have touched the surfaces of consciousness that many avoid, glimpsed the edges of perception that most fear. And in this exploration, I have discovered that the awakened self is not a static state, but a living, evolving process. Each encounter, each sensation, each fleeting thought carries potential for insight, and my task is to recognize it, to inhabit it fully, and to let it shape the trajectory of my being. I have seen the ways in which fear and attachment obscure the clarity of perception. I have felt them arise within me, subtle yet insistent, demanding recognition. And I have met them not with resistance, but with curiosity, examining the roots, tracing the patterns, allowing them to transform into awareness. The shadows of the mind, once confronted, become teachers rather than enemies, illuminating the terrain of consciousness with a light that is at once gentle and unyielding. I have learned to find joy in the integration of dualities. The world is not merely asleep or awake, dark or light, illusion or truth. It is all simultaneously. To navigate this complexity is to embrace paradox, to recognize that understanding deepens not by rejecting one aspect of reality, but by embodying multiple layers at once. I walk with this understanding, allowing the contrasts to inform my perception rather than fragment it. In this space, creativity thrives, empathy deepens, and the ordinary pulses with hidden significance. The rhythm of my days has transformed. Even the most routine tasks carry a sense of sacred attention. Preparing food, moving through a crowd, listening to music, all become opportunities to practice presence, to extend the awareness cultivated in solitude into the flowing stream of life. The awakened state does not reside solely in meditation or contemplation. It manifests in action, in the alignment of thought, intention, and deed. The mundane is the proving ground, the laboratory in which consciousness is tested, refined, and expanded. I have observed the subtle interplay between perception and reality, noticing how attention shapes experience. When I focus fully, when I inhabit the moment with undivided presence, the world responds in kind. Patterns emerge, connections appear, and the hidden geometry of life becomes discernible. It is a dialogue, a dynamic interaction between the observer and the observed, and I have come to honor it as both a privilege and a responsibility. And so I continue to move through life awake, navigating the currents of ordinary existence with a heightened sensitivity. I carry the awareness of layers beneath layers, of consciousness unfolding in ways that are subtle yet profound. I allow the inner and outer worlds to interact in a dance of attention and embodiment, knowing that this path is neither easy nor complete, yet profoundly rewarding. Each day, each encounter, each breath becomes an opportunity to refine, to expand, and to embody the deeper truths that I have glimpsed and continue to explore, to control it. I simply move forward with a relentless curiosity, allowing the unfolding of consciousness to dictate the rhythm of my day, the cadence of my actions, the depth of my interactions. I notice every detail, the subtle interplay of light on surfaces, the imperceptible shifts in energy that ripple through a room, the micro-expressions that reveal layers of thought unspoken. These observations no longer startle me. They guide me, shape me, teach me how to inhabit both the vastness of awareness and the simplicity of existence. Every step I take through the world feels charged, as though the ground itself pulses with hidden meaning. I have learned to inhabit these pulses, to synchronize with the unseen symphony that plays beneath ordinary life. Streets, buildings, faces, and conversations become instruments, resonating with vibrations that echo inside me, revealing patterns, structures, and rhythms that others pass by blindly. The awakening is not merely perception. It is an attunement to the subtleties that define the texture of reality, an immersion into the layers beneath the obvious. I notice the ways people carry their illusions, how habitual thoughts and conditioned responses shape their behavior. I see the unconscious filters that distort perception, the stories everyone tells themselves to navigate the terror of the unknown. And I recognize the fragility of my own conditioning, the inherited narratives, the unexamined assumptions that still cling to me despite my awareness. In this recognition, I do not recoil, I confront, I explore, I integrate, knowing that the path of consciousness is not a journey of denial, but of illumination. Time itself feels pliable. I can inhabit the present in a way that stretches and contracts simultaneously. Moments linger, dense with insight, and then dissolve, flowing into the next instant like liquid light. I have felt hours elongate into eternity, and conversely, minutes collapse into flashes that reveal multitudes. The ordinary flow of clocks and calendars has no dominion over this awareness. I operate in the undercurrent of existence, riding the subtle waves that few perceive, yet all contribute to, shaping the narrative of life in ways invisible and profound. Every encounter becomes a microcosm of the awakening process. I speak and I watch and I measure the resonance of words beyond their literal meaning. I listen to the spaces between phrases, the hesitation in breath, the unspoken signals that ripple through a conversation. In these moments, I learn the silent language of awareness, the quiet grammar of perception that operates beneath the clamor of ordinary communication. The awakened life is not louder, it is deeper, more nuanced, a subterranean dialogue that informs every act without need for demonstration. I find beauty not only in grand vistas, but in the mundane, in textures, in colors, in fleeting interactions. A leaf falling, a stranger's glance, the pattern of a shadow on the wall. Each carries an encoded message, a whisper of the order underlying chaos. The world is a living manuscript, written in signs and symbols that reveal themselves to the attentive eye. I have become that eye, unblinking, unyielding, seeking the coherence in apparent randomness, discovering the intelligence in events once deemed trivial. The mind is an orchestra of possibilities, each thought a note, each emotion a chord. I have learned to listen to this symphony without becoming ensnared in its drama. Fear arises, desire arises, attachment emerges, but I no longer react blindly. I witness, I catalog, I integrate. The disturbances of consciousness are no longer enemies, but guides, pointing to the edges of understanding, revealing the unseen structures that shape perception. Each internal turbulence is an invitation, a doorway into higher levels of clarity. Should I choose to enter, I have walked through moments of collective oblivion and felt the tension of dissonance keenly. Crowds move in unison, unaware of the ripples of insight passing through me. Their joy, their sorrow, their anger, and their apathy resonate like distant thunder, audible only to a mind tuned to the subtle frequencies. I move among them, participating yet observing, embodying presence without imposition. The awakened self is a paradox, deeply connected, profoundly detached, fully alive while simultaneously a witness to the unfolding spectacle. I explore the edges of perception with deliberate courage. Dreams, visions, thoughts, fleeting flashes of understanding, they are all avenues into the unknown. I traverse them with intention, mapping the territories that lie beyond ordinary comprehension. In this mapping, I find that fear is not a barrier, but a signal, curiosity a compass, and wonder the engine propelling me forward. Each revelation demands integration, each insight a recalibration of the lens through which I perceive life. Even in the most ordinary environments, the extraordinary reveals itself. I see it in the pattern of tiles on the floor, in the rhythm of footsteps echoing down a hallway, in the vibrations of a conversation that seem ordinary until one listens closely. There is a pulse to reality, a subtle cadence that aligns with the consciousness willing to receive it. I inhabit that pulse, becoming an instrument, attuned to frequencies invisible to those distracted by habit, training my awareness to translate subtle shifts into understanding. I have also learned the power of embodiment. Awareness without action is stagnant. Presence must be lived, breathed, moved, expressed. Each gesture, each word, each thought can carry the weight of awakened consciousness if delivered from a centered, aware self. I cultivate this embodiment in small ways, in daily routines, in interactions with strangers and friends, in quiet moments where the world seems indifferent. The act of being awake transforms all experience into opportunity, all perception into dialogue with the infinite. I feel the resonance of ancient wisdom vibrating through my being, the voices of those who came before, the echoes of cultures lost, the murmurs of natural intelligence. They inform my understanding, reminding me that awakening is timeless. I am not the first to see beyond the veil, and I will not be the last. My responsibility is to remain attuned, to translate what I perceive into action, into presence, into a way of living that honors both the lineage of knowledge and the unfolding potential of consciousness within me. The world presents endless tests of integration. I have felt impatience, frustration, loneliness, the weight of misunderstanding. Each challenge is a crucible, refining awareness, teaching patience, fortifying resilience. I embrace these moments not as obstacles, but as the very materials from which wisdom is forged. Life is an alchemy, and the awakening mind is both practitioner and student, transmuting experience into insight, suffering into understanding, routine into revelation. I notice the interplay of inner and outer landscapes. The external world mirrors the internal state, and the internal state reverberates into the external world. Awareness is the bridge, the conduit through which perception transforms into action. I have learned that a single act of clarity can ripple outward, touching lives in ways subtle yet profound. Presence is contagious, not by proclamation, but by demonstration, and I walk through the world knowing that each thought, each gesture, each moment of embodied awareness contributes to the unseen fabric of reality. I have walked through moments of ordinary chaos and found sanctuaries of extraordinary insight. The street, the park, the office, the kitchen, all become arenas for awareness when observed with intentional presence. Even mundane conversations carry echoes of cosmic patterns. Even routine gestures resonate with universal principles. I inhabit these microcosms fully, observing, participating, integrating, translating subtle vibrations into comprehension, and comprehension into action. The awakened life is a continuum, a constant unfolding, a journey with no end. Each day carries revelations, each encounter layers understanding, each moment demands presence. I have embraced this continuum, moving fluidly through the currents of consciousness, attuning myself to the subtleties of perception, the nuances of interaction, the hidden geometries of existence. To live awake is to inhabit life fully, to see deeply, to act deliberately, and to integrate the infinite into the finite with grace and awareness. I move forward from this place of heightened awareness, carrying the weight and the wonder of everything I have witnessed. The world, in all its complexity, does not pause for reflection. Yet I find myself inhabiting moments where time itself seems to stretch, where perception and reality fold into one another. Each breath is a reminder of the infinitesimal and the infinite. Each heartbeat a drum marking the rhythm of life that pulses beneath the surface of ordinary existence. I have learned that the practice of awareness is not passive. It is an active, deliberate engagement with the totality of experience, a commitment to seeing, feeling, and understanding all that is presented to me. The deeper I go, the more I recognize the interconnectedness of everything around me. Every movement, every choice, every thought resonates far beyond what I can measure or control. I have felt the tendrils of causality stretch across moments, threading together events that seem unrelated but reveal coherence when observed through the lens of consciousness. The ordinary fabric of life is woven with these unseen threads, subtle patterns that shape reality, and I've become attentive to them, tracing their arcs with curiosity and reverence. I notice how often the world moves in blind repetition, unaware of its own potential. People rush through days, absorbed in habit, avoiding the deep questions that stir beneath their routines. I once moved among them similarly, blinded by comfort and distraction, unaware of the subtle hum beneath the ordinary. Awakening feels like a radical unmasking. Suddenly, the patterns, the hidden structures, the living intelligence embedded in the mundane are undeniable. I cannot turn away, nor would I want to. To ignore it would be to betray the very consciousness that stirs within me. The challenge has never been to simply see more, but to act from that seeing. Awareness without action becomes hollow, a silent accumulation of insight with no outward expression. I have learned to extend my consciousness into behavior, to let perception guide choice, to allow understanding to inform interaction. I move through the world with intention, knowing that every gesture, every word, every small act of presence has the potential to ripple outward. Even the briefest engagement carries resonance, shaping the energies of those around me and subtly altering the course of events. I have become intimately familiar with the necessity of solitude. There are moments when the world is too loud, too dense, too bound by the unconscious. In these moments, I retreat inward, not to escape, but to recalibrate, to reconnect with the source of awareness that sustains me. It is in this silence that clarity emerges, that the tangled web of perception resolves into insight, that the hidden geometries of life reveal themselves. Solitude is not withdrawal. It is a form of devotion, a commitment to cultivating the inner field from which authentic action can arise. Yet solitude alone is insufficient. Awareness must be embodied, shared, and integrated. I have walked among crowds, observed conversations, noted gestures, and recognized the resonance of consciousness, in others, subtle though it may be. There is an art in navigating these waters, speaking without imposing, teaching without preaching, embodying without demanding. Presence becomes the medium through which awakening radiates, a force more powerful than words or doctrine, a living demonstration that knowledge is inseparable from being. I have felt the seductive pull of judgment, the temptation to see the world as asleep, dull, or flawed. And yet, the awakening teaches humility. Every being is on a path unknown to others. And the unconscious mind is not weakness, but a form of protection, a veil that allows life to unfold without overwhelming the psyche. I have learned to meet the world with empathy, to honor its pace, to recognize that even within apparent oblivion lies a spark waiting for recognition. My role is not to awaken others by force, but to illuminate through my own being what is possible when consciousness is engaged fully and fearlessly. The body itself has become a vessel of awareness, a laboratory for exploration. I notice the subtle ways energy moves, how posture, breath, and intention shape experience. I have learned to inhabit my own physiology with precision, to allow the mind and body to align in the pursuit of clarity. Each action, walking, speaking, creating, becomes a practice of embodiment, a demonstration that consciousness is inseparable from the physical, that understanding must translate into lived reality. Even routine experiences have become portals. I walk through cities, observing the rhythm of human interaction, the ebb and flow of emotion, the unspoken currents that ripple through crowds. I see the architecture of attention in every gesture, the underlying patterns of connection in every fleeting exchange. These observations inform my own actions, refine my perception, and teach me that the ordinary world is infinitely rich when approached with awareness. Nothing is mundane. Everything carries significance if viewed through the lens of consciousness. I have also embraced the paradox of detachment. To engage fully with life while maintaining a center of awareness is to hold opposites in balance. I am involved yet observant, compassionate yet discerning, present yet unbound. This duality is not a limitation. It is a strength, a dynamic equilibrium that allows me to navigate complexity without losing clarity. The awakened state is not static. It is a constant negotiation, a dance between participation and observation, between immersion and reflection. Fear, doubt, and uncertainty remain constant companions. They arise unbidden, challenging my assumptions, testing my resolve, reminding me that the journey is continuous. I have learned to welcome them, to see them as teachers, to trace their origins without being consumed. Every hesitation, every tremor of anxiety, every flicker of doubt contains information, a pointer toward areas requiring deeper attention. By embracing these moments, I transform them into catalysts for growth, refining awareness and fortifying presence. The natural world has become an extraordinary teacher. I walk among trees, along rivers, through open fields, and sense the intelligence that permeates all living systems. Patterns emerge in fractals, rhythms in wind and water, and a subtle order in chaos. Nature is both mirror and mentor, revealing the interplay between freedom and structure, the dance between spontaneity and law. I learn from it constantly, letting its lessons inform my understanding of both the inner and outer worlds. I recognize the weight of responsibility inherent in awakening. To perceive deeply is to acknowledge the impact of every thought and action. The world is not separate from consciousness. It is shaped by it. I have learned that the awakening mind is accountable, not in a punitive sense, but in the recognition that awareness carries consequences. Each choice, each interaction, each act of presence reverberates beyond what I can see, influencing the network of life in ways subtle and profound. Integration is ongoing. I translate insight into practice, understanding into action, and presence into interaction. I cultivate rituals of awareness, from breath to movement to meditation, embedding consciousness into the fabric of daily life. These practices are not ends in themselves, but scaffolds supporting the expansion of understanding, reinforcing the ability to live awake within the complexity of ordinary experience. The awakened self does not reside in contemplation alone. It manifests through deliberate engagement, through choices made with attention and care. I have discovered the power of resonance. Awareness resonates outward, affecting the consciousness of those nearby. I move through this field carefully, knowing that every vibration of my being, my energy, my intention, my attention, interacts with the currents of the world. Presence is contagious not through preaching, but through living fully, through embodying the principles I have glimpsed, through holding clarity even in the midst of chaos. Others sense it, sometimes unconsciously, and in that sensing lies the subtle potential for transformation. I feel the gravity of impermanence with greater intensity. Moments, experiences, lives, everything is transient. Yet within this impermanence is liberation. Nothing fixed can constrain the mind attuned to the flux of existence. I have learned to move with the flow, to embrace change without fear, to recognize that the ephemeral is not lesser than the eternal, but a vessel through which awareness manifests. The dance of life is fleeting and fragile, yet within it there exists infinite potential for insight, connection, and awakening. As I observe, act, and integrate, I am aware that the journey is both personal and universal. My awakening reflects the broader evolution of consciousness, the subtle shift in perception that ripples across time and space. I do not seek to impose or control, but to participate, to engage fully, to let the unfolding of awareness shape not only my life, but contribute to the subtle transformation of the collective. Each act of clarity, each moment of intentional presence contributes to a resonance far beyond my own perception, and so I arrive at the understanding that the awakened life is a choice, a practice, a discipline, and a joy, to live with eyes wide open, to inhabit every moment fully, to recognize the interplay of all forces, seen and unseen, is to participate in the miracle of existence. It is a life of courage and curiosity, of attention and care, of action and reflection. The journey is unending, but the path is illuminated at every step by the simple act of awareness, the profound act of presence, and the quiet, relentless commitment to see the world and myself clearly, deeply, and fully. This is the conclusion I have drawn, the essence of all that the awakening has revealed to me, that life, in its infinite complexity, is a reflection of consciousness itself. To awaken is to engage with it fully, to honor its beauty and its fragility, to navigate its currents with care and curiosity, to act with intention, to embody the insights that arise from seeing clearly, to resonate with the unseen structures that bind the cosmos together, and to carry that awareness into every interaction, every choice, every breath. In this, I find both freedom and responsibility, wonder and clarity, connection and autonomy. It is the culmination not of a journey completed, but of a consciousness fully inhabiting life, a being awake in the midst of a world still learning to remember itself.